Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Data Dispatch in Holy Toledo. Palantir comes out here with a new mega announcement, I would call, that is a huge game changer in terms of this issue that they are trying to address, and it really shows how Palantir can evolve at a rapid pace while collaborating with some of the top partners in the space, aka NVDA. What we see here at Palantir is addressing one of the major issues that we're seeing for the AI build out in this industrial revolution that we're seeing unfold right before our eyes. And I think this just gives a good example on how personally I think we're still early in the AI build out. And that may seem crazy as everybody's calling the top for AI, but personally, I'm not sitting on the sidelines. I'm trying to enjoy the ride while I can. So we'll be talking about that. Also, we're seeing Bitcoin and Ethereum catching a little bit of a bid here. We'll be talking about some of the more individual names, a lot of the whole AI data center trade, how that's playing out, what we're seeing in terms of the broader market, and some important macroeconomic data that we're going to be getting tomorrow. Hit that like button, subscribe. Let's try to hit 30,000 subscribers. That's our next goal. Pop it up on the screen here. Let's talk about Palantir in terms of its price action. Wow. We talked about this in yesterday's video, a nice reversal after Palantir hung out here in the mid 160s for a little bit. We had talked about that it's probably not going to spend a ton of time there. And that is because historically, price action for Palantir really hasn't experienced a ton of trading action within that 160 zone. We've seen a lot of consolidation here between the 170s. And it was important for Palantir to recapture that support level. And that is exactly what happened. Palantir was able to recapture the support level at 170 and is now entering this consolidation phase, but is quickly reaching the top resistance point here at about the mid 180s. Currently at 178, we can see up about another 51 cents in the overnight hours, along with the general market that's doing quite well. We saw a decent amount of buying pressure across the board. Now, here's the official announcement from Palantir. This is probably why we're seeing a lot of price action coming in here. In terms of the bottleneck to AI innovation here is no longer algorithms in terms of designing these large language models. You know, all the different companies are designing the LLMs, fine-tuning them, trying to get them involved in specific niches, doing better with research and memory. That's not the issue anymore. The issue is the power and the compute. And the AI demand is going to continue to increase. The main bottleneck that needs to be addressed is where are we going to get this power from to be able to sustain the demand for AI and the requirement. Now, America, they say here, is at an inflection point in the energy infrastructure build out, and it requires software build on an entirely different scale. Alongside here, NVIDIA and Centerpoint, they are launching a new operating system called Chain Reaction to address this by accelerating the AI build-out with energy producers, distributors, and data center and infrastructure builders. Holy wow. What we see here, Amit does, talks about this right away. I like to listen because this is where I saw it first of all, and I like just getting his right to the minute updates. I feel like he is ready to go with these updates as soon as we see these announcements. But what they're doing is basically building an operating system specifically to handle the supply constraints, the chains, and the energy problems that arise when trying to bring the one thing online that trillions of dollars are being spent on, and that is the data centers. So the cascade effect here could be quite enormous with a lot of variability and a volatility, of course. But we'll be talking about, we have been talking about a lot of these AI data center, trade names, talking about these different types of stocks that are getting involved with building these AI data centers, providing the energy, because this infrastructure, just look what's happening in Texas right now, is becoming quite crazy. So in terms of Palantir and NVIDIA coming together on this, they're probably going to be partnering, I would think, or working with a lot of these big AI data center infrastructure names, and I'm going to be happy to be reporting on it. Very cool to see here. So what does that mean for the general market? We see the S&P 500. That's really just hanging out in this mid 6850s, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. What we saw today in terms of just on the daily, some intraday things were interesting to see. At least we saw kind of a liquidity grab, I would say around noon, and a big reversal. But we see here 68.57, above 6,800. This is where the S&P 500 has been trading at since November 26th. Taking a breather and consolidating right here, probably just waiting for the interest rate decision that we should be getting, I think, next week, I believe. And we're probably not going to see a ton of movement until we see some of the data that'll be released tomorrow. What we see, futures are basically flat. SPY's up about $1, kind of also just hanging out here at 685. I mean, the SPY's just been hanging out in the 680s here alongside with the index that's been hanging out. NVIDIA is catching a little bit of a bid here at 184. This could be possibly, due to a little bit of the Palantir partnership. But in terms of the markets, we're getting PCE data, the price index for tomorrow for September. We're also going to be seeing consumer sentiment, preliminary data, and consumer credit. So these are going to be, how is the consumer doing in terms of their resiliency within the prices of this market? What's PCE data going to be looking at in terms of working on a barometer for the Fed, an inflationary type of guide? Because that's kind of the whole battle that the Fed has right now is basically, okay, we see a weakening labor market, which is lots of data is coming out that is kind of reassuring that we're continuing to see a weakening labor market. But how does that battle against inflation, which is remaining kind of relatively sticky? However, what we're seeing is now traders are pricing in about an 87% chance of a cut next Wednesday, which is far higher than just a couple weeks ago. So in terms of 2026, talking about here, we have some quotations about some strategists saying it's a wild card as it pertains to inflation. I don't know. Inflation is sticky where it's at. At least it's not really increasing at a really high rate. I think the market would be more scared of that. That would bring more uncertainty and volatility through here. So we'll see what happens with this data, of course. So we're probably going to see some volatility based on that. Now let's talk about cryptocurrency. What you see here with Bitcoin and Ethereum experiencing a little bit of a bid right here. And especially with Bitcoin, what we saw and kind of with Ethereum too across the board over the last 24 hours here, Bitcoin intraday right out between 1 and 2 o'clock saw a sell-off basically down to about 91,000, but immediately snapped back, sitting here and consolidating right here at about 92,000 as that correlates to Ethereum right here, sitting at about 3174. This has been around the 3,200 area. Ethereum also came down here to about 3,000 for a little bit. In terms of Ethereum itself, it's fully gone through that Fusaka upgrade. We talked about that yesterday, which should help bring Ethereum more into of a flat or possibly a deflationary type of environment. Ethereum is more inflationary in terms of their supply, and this is because L2s basically have to burn more Ethereum because they have to pay more transaction fees for actually operating on the L1 ecosystem, which is the mainnet of Ethereum. How that relates here in terms of the actual traditional finance sector getting involved, we talked about this yesterday. A lot of these TradFi platforms like Vanguard, Charles Schwab, all now announcing that they're going to be offering Bitcoin and Ethereum trading either immediately or Charles Schwab here saying in early 26. What this does is open up a ton of possible liquidity that can be coming in. I mean, these are $1 trillion of now possible assets that could come into the crypto ecosystem, and especially with Ethereum working to tokenize the whole traditional Wall Street financial sector. And that's what we've seen with Tom Lee, and specifically looking at BMNR right here, starting to finally catch a bid. Everybody's been experiencing so much pain as became a community member basically. BMNR finally was able to have the reversal at 25. We saw it recapturing that $30 level of support, which is an important level. And now we see BMNR that's up here at 36.84, up about another 1.5% basically in the overnight session. BMNR is doing quite well at 36.84. Ethereum, as it continues to battle into the lower 3,000s here, if we see continuing of, momentum coming into these types of cryptocurrencies, that's where you're going to see BMNR. It's going to experience possibly more momentum. Could this be a nice V-shaped recovery that is starting to build out? Talking about going back, kind of rolling it back, circling back here to the whole Palantir and the AI bottleneck, the AI innovation in terms of power and compute. That's what are we talking about? We're talking about these kind of neo clouds. We're talking about the data centers. We're talking about power. That's looking at the stocks that we've been talking about for a while here. Nebius, CoreWeave, CIFR, IREN. One particular one that I'm interested in right now is CIFR. CIFR right here, sitting at about a $7.83 billion market cap. CIFR comes up about 0.10%. Basically was able to hold here today. After the market opened, it didn't quite look the best. Came down here to about 1742. That same thing kind of happened even with Iran right here. We saw the same whole type of movement. Specifically, what we're seeing with CIFR right here is a decent amount of volume that is coming in, not even on spot volume though, but it's call volume. We're seeing deep out of the money leaps that are being purchased. Whales are predicted to be moving and taking large positions right here, looking at single leg buys. These are straight bullish bets with no puts attached in terms of a hedge. And what we're seeing here is a lot of flow that's being tracked on X with these huge share accumulations, and a lot of them are above the ask. Looking here, so we could have big money that's moving into CIFR. Possibly. Now, going back, of course, with these data center stocks, these neo clouds and stuff like that, always do your own research on which one you think is going to be the best, which one you like. But nonetheless, Palantir, I could see, and with this new whole type of operating system that they're working on, chain reaction here, I think is going to be announcing partnerships with these in the relatively near future, working to optimize and bring software solutions to optimize their energy, basically production and power creation. So peace out, take care. Let me know what you think about that. I'll catch you guys later.